I noticed recently a couple of people I know are morphing their their coverage and their businesses, if you will. And I know I met one, the other one I met virtually through email and so on. And one is called the CTO Advisor. Keith, I met him when I was part of the IoT or IT influencer marketing program at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, HPE. And he was one of those. And eventually that program closed, which was doomed from the beginning. And he went on to do hybrid cloud writing analysis and consulting and so on. And he just recently wrote on X, previously known as Twitter, that he was morphing again. And of course, yeah, hybrid cloud, that was a thing too. And and he's moving on somewhere else. He said to be announced later. It'll be very interesting. He's a very intelligent person. Interesting too. And one reason I got into the IT influencer programs at both Dell and Hewlett Packard Enterprise was because I called my website The Manufacturing Connection, and I was all about connections and connectivity, which became IoT. So six years ago, 8 years ago, Internet of Things, Industrial Internet of Things, those were big topics and everybody's talking about it. And a few people actually did stuff about it and so on. So Stacy Higginbotham, who I read at previous IT writing gigs that she had, started a site when one of her sites closed, and it was called Stacy on IoT. And she's been running that for quite a while. She's really intelligent and does some cool stuff. But I noticed it was harder and harder for her to come up with topics and companies and so on and sponsors. And she wrote, maybe 8 or 10 months ago about broadening the coverage of her site a little bit. So she just announced this past week that she was closing Stacy on IoT and look for future plans. And whatever she does, I'm sure will be very interesting. This is Gary. This podcast is called Gary on Manufacturing, but don't be surprised if someday I retitle it to just Gary on whatever, as things keep changing and morphing as they always have. And this podcast is brought to you as always lately from my longtime sponsor. It's Inductive Automation. Discover a whole new perspective on industrial automation with Ignition, packed with innovative features for the modern control system like unlimited licensing, high-powered tags, and mobile-first flexibility, and an intuitive built-in design environment. Ignition supports enterprises of any size or industry. And I think that's a key part right there, moving along with the industries that are hot. See all Ignition has to offer at inductiveautomation.com. And now you can have the power of Ignition with the convenience of the cloud. Ignition Cloud Ignition Edition makes it easy to add the power of the cloud to your Ignition architectures. Expand and hybridize your enterprise operations, leverage elastic architecture that instantly scales up or down and securely hosts and deploys solutions on the world's most trusted cloud platforms on a pay-as-you-go plan. One of the cool things when I first met Steve Ekman, when he first started Inductive Automation, that goes back 20 years now, I think, was he had been an integrator and was not happy with pricing models. And he said, I'm going to do something that, the software is written from the ground up to be IT friendly. 20 years ago, that was revolutionary. Now everybody wishes they could do that. And as also the pricing model that he felt wasn't fair. And he built a company that financially could survive and thrive on a different financial model. And they are actually, I'm not paid to say this part of it, they're actually doing quite well and still thriving. And not everybody in the industrial software and industrial automation space can actually say that. So I was thinking about some of these old time acquaintances that go back, well, not so old, but maybe 6 or 8 years that are changing, and I've kept changing. as things go along too. But I got to thinking about technology market cycles, and I've been involved in my career with three of them. And back in the late 70s, I had a boss who it was pretty farsighted in a way, actually, but unfortunately not in the right company with the right financial backing. But he decided that all the work I was doing for him, he was vice president before we had O's like CTOs and all those kind of O's. He was vice president of product development, engineering at the company I worked for, and I worked directly for him. And among the things I did was I was in charge of all the data that came out of the engineering and product development department. I needed to make sure it was correct, got to the right hands, was updated. So engineering change was and notices were part of my domain. A bunch of other things that cost cutting and better cost utilization. Kind of a broad portfolio. And he said, "Oh, Gary." Actually, my name was Al in that company, but anyway, yeah, Gary. I got an idea. We have an IBM mini computer sitting here, and all it's doing is mailing lists for the customer club. And we could take it and we could turn it into like a real IT department and do real IT stuff. So I went off to some classes at IBM. This was 1977, 1978, and I was being groomed to become the head of IT. Back in those days, it was called Management Information Services, MIS. But regardless, I was going to be the IT manager, and that worked well for a while. I actually implemented what today would be called an MES system, and that was cool. And I learned an awful lot. I got into IT. I was reading IT journals and reading some writers that eventually I met many years later. It was pretty cool, but then the company hit some bad times and pretty much we all disappeared. The company didn't. It's after 30 some years, it's thriving again. But anyway, I got into IT and I saw that, and I saw, the burgeoning of new compute platforms and the burgeoning of software and little companies starting up with all kinds of ideas. And IT was really cool. And it was going on. And I was there kind of at the beginning, and then a little bit later and a little bit later. At the same time, I was getting involved in PCs. Don't know how it happened, but I ran across, I don't know, an ad or something, and I bought a little computer called a Timex Sinclair, and I learned basic programming and assembly, and I wrote some games on it. And my wife was teaching third grade as I was playing around with it and having trouble with kids with spelling, and I wrote a couple of programs, kind of a precursor to Duolingo. Well, I wasn't that smart, but anyway, wrote, did a couple of things as education aids for her students learning her spelling words and that sort of stuff. And then moved to a Radio Shack TRS-80, affectionately known as a Trish 80. And my dad is a public accountant, not a CPA, but just a public accountant. And he did accounting for small businesses. And I set up the computer with an accounting program and set up several of his clients. So I got into accounting and accounting software and all that kind of stuff. And so I was dabbling in PCs, and that was 1978 to 81 or so thereabouts, getting familiar with all of that. And it was really cool. And then if you remember about that time, and a little bit later on, I got into sales and marketing of PCs and installation of them, and I got pretty deep into the technology. And if you remember the thriving like PC media marketplace, PC Magazine, and it's filled with products and new companies and so on. And Byte Magazine, where I learned an awful lot of computer engineering. It was a great magazine. I was wishing I could replicate it when we started Automation World, to be honest, but those days were past. But anyway, so there was, it's just a thriving, not, an ecosystem around PCs and software. And I used to buy new motherboards and upgrade from one, system on a chip to another processor and all that kind of stuff. And it was fun and exciting through the 90s as I upgraded my computers. And I had the same box. I had a Gateway metal box, but inside was like 6 new generations of Intel chips and so on, and kept upgrading. And computers were thriving and fun, and we were getting more and more useful. In the 80s, we started I worked on a company where I had learned automation, which is the third technology marketplace, and we were putting PCs as part of automated assembly machine systems that we were doing. And I was learning the early PLCs, the Allen Bradley PLC-3, and I forget what the Modicon was at that time that we used. And there was GE, and there was Square D, and there were a bunch of PLC manufacturers that we used in our machines, depending on the spec of the company we were building the machine for, and so on. And so all three of those technology market cycles, I was working in one way or another, either applying or learning or sales and marketing of them for a long time, for 80s, 90s, for at least 20 years, learning more and doing more on that. And they were all like thriving. There were like new ideas, new companies, new products, new extensions. And remember when motion control was a separate little black box, and then eventually became part of the PLC, and you can program those as part of the PLC, ladder logic, oh God, and so on, and the evolution of it all. So I saw pretty much all of that. I got into media in 98, and I was in control engineering, and control engineering was full of new products, and the ads were really thick from new companies and new ideas and so on. And it was really cool. Matter of fact, the editorial director expected all of our articles to be product roundups, A, to keep all the advertisers happy, of course, and B, because there were so many new products, and it was keeping up with what was new in HMI, what was new in a PLC, what was new in motion control and sensors and terminal blocks and all that kind of stuff. Even though I remember a class in the 1990s when the product manager, or product, not really manager, came in and said, "Terminal blocks are my life," and we all groaned. I mean, how could that be your life? Anyway, been through that, and I've seen the innovation and the thriving and the media that just grew up and was so thick and vibrant, with writers that were really smart, and so on. And then I've seen each one of them consolidate. Remember, the IT market is consolidated so much that I don't follow that extremely closely anymore, but I'm aware of Dell, who bought EMC, probably a mistake, but it got him into enterprise architectures anyway. And so there's Dell, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, when Hewlett Packard split into like the printer division and the compute division, and so HPE, and then Hitachi Vantara. I've been to a couple of their user groups as they do high level compute. All of those thought they would do IoT, and that's how I wound up there. They were all going to be Internet of Things, and they would get into industrial Internet of Things, not realizing what a lot of people discovered to their chagrin was the industrial market's really tough. They don't spend money quickly. They're not early adopters, they're late adopters, and don't necessarily buy tons of stuff. And so we've got, the PC market consolidation. Apple's still going on, but what's keeping Apple going? Mostly cell phones. Mostly it's this Apple iPhone that is, tons more powerful than the computers I learned to program on back in 1978 to 85, back in those era. But Apple is still going. The PC market is consolidated considerably. It's still around, but then there are cheap versions, and you can get Chromebooks, the modified and shrunk down operating system. You don't need all that stuff, and so on. And there's no thriving media anymore in PCs. There's thriving podcasters and websites around the Apple ecosystem, and since I'm an Apple user, I'm familiar with that. And but even the last few years have been tough for them, getting enough advertisers to make a decent income. So I've seen that go, and I've looked at the automation. I've been writing about control instrumentation automation software for the last 25 years. And I keep changing. Like I said, I got into IoT. The security people came along, but there's not, security companies don't advertise and don't support things. And most of those companies seem to exist to get purchased, as do a lot of the smaller upstart software companies. I only know a very few that are still thriving, that have found a market niche, and they keep serving it, and they keep serving it better, and so on. And but then you look at the media that I came out of not that long ago, is serving the automation industry, both process control and factory automation and so on. And that's no longer thriving anymore for the last quite a few years. One of the magazines I get is shrunk to 36 pages. It's got 6 ad pages. Used to be we had to have 60% ad pages in a 90-page folio. So we're like a third the size, and with a tenth of the advertising. It's just, that's an unsustainable financial model. And it's unfortunate, but I saw the writing on the wall when in 2013 I left Automation World and just said, I'll go out on my own. I'll make most of my money consulting and doing custom research and analysis, and some money from sponsors, like the sponsor of this podcast. So still have questions, is there a big question we're solving? That used to be the National Instruments question, solving big engineering questions. And that's still an interesting thing. What are the big things? NI isn't doing that anymore. They sold. It's one of those things where the investors decide it's time to cash out. And they had been groomed for a long time to be part of a corporate environment, and they were bought by Emerson very quietly, actually. One small press release, and that was it. And I have heard no word from National Instruments ever since. Not surprisingly. The first thing that goes is accounting, and the second thing that goes is marketing. So typically, I've been through too many of these in my life. But anyway, and I used to ask that question. So I still ask that question, what's the next big thing? What's hot? What big problem can we solve? And right now, a couple of things. One, all the major automation companies that have consolidated all of the control and instrumentation long ago are calling themselves software companies, except my latest press release from Rockwell Automation, they call themselves not the leader in automation and software, but the leader in digital transformation. So I guess that's the next big thing, but I don't think that's a big thing. Heck, what I was doing in 1978 was digital transformation of a sense, whatever. So not necessarily new, but the other thing that I see is sustainability. We've supplied an awful lot of technology that helped refineries and chemical plants and other kinds of plants. And we basically fouled the atmosphere, we fouled the ground, we fouled, landfills and all kinds of stuff. And now there's a lot of stuff on sustainability, finding gas leaks, finding new ways to process hydrogen, which is a much cleaner fuel than hydrocarbons. Ways to capture hydrocarbons and sequester or use the carbon and use the hydrogen. A lot of ideas of sustainability that way. Biomass has been big and might be bigger, don't know. Interesting podcast. If you go search your podcast app, you might find Technology Untangled. A guy by the name of Michael Bird at Hewlett Packard Enterprise does a really cool podcast on the latest in technology. And what the latest one, and I'm recording this in mid-August 2023. And so last week he sent one out about new sources of energy, using technology for new sources of energy. The previous one was using technology to rebuild after disasters, and interviewed some people in the Ukraine. So some interesting ideas of what could be next for technology. Don't forget, from time immemorial, technology has existed for essentially two things. One is war, which could be viewed as a benefit to the people who are defending themselves. And two is something that benefits humanity, from the first plow that helped grow more wheat to some of the latest stuff. Yeah, we've got social media that hasn't helped hardly anything, except Twitter has been fantastic for like the Arab Spring and other kinds of communication when an autocratic government tries to shut things down. So even parts of social media have been useful, even though for the most part, not that much. And sometimes even not useful. But where can we go? What's coming up? What's coming up next? There's another technology cycle, and I'm not talking the Gartner hype cycle. It's not hype. It's just first there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of new ideas, a lot of new companies, a lot of stuff happening. Things consolidate, the market matures. There's not a lot of movement of customers anymore. Something new will come up. What will it be? Yeah, that's my curiosity right now. Even at my advanced age, I'm still thinking, what comes next? What's the new cool thing? What problem will we try to solve? Even if it's just the problem of how to use ChatGPT for our benefit. There's ideas there. So my thanks to my sponsor, Inductive Automation. Discover a whole new perspective on industrial automation with Ignition, packed with innovative features for the modern control system, like unlimited licensing, high-powered tags, a mobile-first flexibility, and an intuitive built-in design environment. Ignition supports enterprises of any size or industry. See all Ignition has to offer at inductiveautomation.com. And now you can get your Ignition in the cloud with Cloud Edition. Makes it easy to add power of the cloud to your Ignition architectures, extend and hybridize your enterprise operations, leverage elastic architecture, and instantly scale up or down securely, host and deploy solutions on the world's most trusted cloud platforms on a pay-as-you-go plan. Thank you. Hey, like this on whatever cloud or podcast platform you're on, or you can pass it along to friends and neighbors. And other than that, hey, have a good day. Go solve a big problem.